All right, so we were talking about the temperature pressure chart, and we said that a good freezer temperature was about 0 degrees. So freezer temp is about 0 degrees, right? Okay, that's good. But if you set something for a specific temperature, you want it to where it can absorb heat. And I'll explain. Like we were talking about air conditioners earlier and said that our body's 98.6 degrees. Well, if I have an air conditioner running at 98 degrees, it is taking heat out, but we don't feel comfortable. So what is a good comfortable temperature on an AC that if we were to set it, what do you think would be a good temperature?
About 10 degrees below, so 70, 75.
Okay, about 15 to 20 degrees colder.
Colder.
Okay, so if we're about 98 degrees, we want to be like 78, 77
Right.
to where we feel comfortable, because the AC needs to be a lower temperature than the heat we're trying to remove.
To actually be able to remove the heat, yes.
And the same principle goes here with the 0 degrees. If we're at 0 degrees and we wanted to remove the heat, we want the freezer to be 0 degrees so the coils that are absorbing heat, this evaporator here has to be colder than that temperature
So
that we're trying to
it's
achieve.
-5, -6 degrees in order to.
Well, what did we say? How much colder? Not -5, but if we're trying.
15 to 20.
So if we want 0 degrees, we want the evaporator temperature to be about 15 to 20 degrees colder. Let's just say 15 degrees colder, minus 15 degrees. Okay, this is the evaporator itself. Okay, so we want this coil to be 15 degrees colder than the air, or otherwise it'll never absorb the heat. If this is 0 degrees, we probably only achieve about 10 or 15 degrees in our freezer. We won't achieve 0 degrees in our freezer. And in some freezers, we can almost go 5 to 10 degrees below 0, which means this temperature would have to actually be a little bit lower.
So it'd be 20.
About 20 degrees, okay? But 15 to 20 is about average for most units. So in order to be 15 degrees negative, where is that on the chart?
And what refrigerator are we talking about? 134?
Well, right here, where is it on the chart?
What's
On
it?
the temperature.
Would be right in between, that line between 20 and 10.
Okay, so right there is about 15 below 0. So if I take this all the way across to 134A, we're going to be about these pressures. Okay, this is 1.8 psi, that's 3.8 inch vacuum. And in between that's about 0 psi. So in order to achieve this 0 psi, we will get about a 15 degree evaporator. And this all came about because we said, well, if I walk up to a refrigerator and I see it's not cooling properly, but it is cold or something, we want to know, is it got the right pressure? How do I know what the pressure is supposed to be? I have to go to my temperature pressure chart. Well, how do I know? I mean, I'm looking at the chart, I'm looking at numbers. How do I know where on the chart to look? Well, we have to know the temperatures we're trying to achieve. Remember, you were talking about R22 in an air conditioning system. We got R22 right here. Okay? We have to get the temperature coils of an air conditioner cool enough to cool a room. So it has to be lower than 70 degrees, right? Now, in air conditioning, we work a little bit differently. In air conditioners, we want it as cold as we could possibly get, the coils, without freezing the coils. What temperature do they freeze at?
Freezing temperature is 32.
Freezing temperature is 32 degrees. And I'll explain to you why I'm getting to that. Freezing temperature is 32 degrees, so we don't want the coils to be that cold. But we want them as cold as we can possibly get. So in order for it to be as cold as we can possibly get, we tried about 36, 38 degrees. So if we look at this at 36 to 38 degrees, somewhere around here, our air conditioning system R22 is going to be about 67 PSI. Now that's average, and in air conditioning they do a little bit more. They check what they call superheat or subcooling. We're not going to talk about that yet. But that's what they do, is they measure it to be as accurate or efficient as the AC could possibly be. But again, if we know the temperature we're trying to achieve, we can know the pressure. And the reason why I brought that up is because at 15 degrees below zero, what's going to happen on this evaporator? What are we going to see when it's working properly? We're going to see frost. And in order to make this unit work efficiently, if it builds up too much ice, the air, instead of flowing over the coils at 15 below zero, it flows over ice, which is 32 degrees. That's too warm. That's 42 degrees or 47 degrees warmer than we want. We're going to lose cooling. So a lot of people say, well, if my freezer's all frozen up with ice, why isn't it cooling? Yeah, but it's 47 degrees warmer. Because if you say 32 degrees ice and negative 15, that's 47 degrees warmer than the coils are supposed to be.
Right.
We've lost cooling.
Right.
We didn't lose 100% cooling, but we lost the efficiency of the cooling.
Sure.
So we add a defrost system. We put a heater on here, and every so often we turn the heater on to melt all this ice off so that the unit's cooling properly.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Now we do run into some refrigerators, like Sub-Zero, for example, that they have a refrigerator and a freezer side by side. And they have two separate compressors, one compressor for the freezer and one compressor for the refrigerator.
Isn't that called inline? There's a term.
Not in series. We're talking, that's a single compressor where it runs in both evaporators, but I'm talking about two separate refrigeration systems.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay, one is a freezer and one's a fridge.
Okay.
Has its own compressor, its own condenser, its own evaporator. Now, when you look at those evaporators, they don't have a defrost even. Okay, well, you're like, man, though, when the system's running, if we're running at 15 below zero, in the back of the customer's refrigerator, that's all going to freeze up. Well, that's not good. We can't have that freezing up. So, what temperature is a good temperature in a refrigerator? We said zero for the freezer. What temperature is a good temperature for the refrigerator?
We don't want anything to freeze in the refrigerator, so I would say between 36 and 38. 35.
More like 34 or 36. So a refrigerator, and I'll put it up here, is 34 degrees. Okay? And a refrigerator with 34 degrees is going to keep my milk cold but not freezing. But what did we say about the evaporator on the freezer? In order to reach zero, we had to be about 15 degrees colder, right?
Right.
So if we went to 134A at 34 degrees, we went down here, we went to like 34 degrees, which is right here, that would mean, I'm sorry,
I
that's
get you,
pressure.
I get you. So 34 degrees.
No, I
right
made
there
a mistake.
in the
This is pressure here.
middle. Yes.
34 has got to be over here.
Right.
Okay, so let me just correct myself. Say 34 would be like right in here. That would put my pressure about 25 to 30 psi, right?
Yes.
In order to reach 38 degrees.
Yes.
Or 34 degrees. I have to pause my recording.
It's funny because I'm actually loading that sound.
Turn this recorder back on and go back to. So we were talking about a refrigerator at 34 degrees. That would put our pressure for 34, let's say halfway, that'd be in between 25 and 34 psi, like 30 psi.
29 and a half. 30
Okay,
psi.
but that's exactly 34 degrees. We have to have the evaporator colder than that in order to absorb
Right.
the heat. So, what did we say? We went colder by how much?
15 degrees.
So we want to go 15 degrees colder than 30. So we want to be about 15 degrees colder here, which would put us about here. So we want an actual pressure about 18 to 20 psi. If we have a low side pressure 18 to 20 psi, will we build up frost on the evaporator?
If we have, anything?
If we're at 18 psi, for example, we're going to be at about 10 to 20 degrees. Would ice build up on the evaporator?
Ice, yes.
It would, but it's not, you know, in the negatives.
Right.
Plus, when the compressor shuts off, say the refrigerator's cold enough, the refrigerator itself so warm, any ice that would build up
Will melt on
will
its
just
own.
melt right off.
Right.
Okay? So these pressures, we have to know the temperatures we're trying to achieve to know what the pressures are supposed to be.
So if I'm at a freezer and I want to set my temperature, like, you know, the freezer's empty, it's not cooling at all. I want to set my temperature at 0 degrees. That's what I would go by. Go at 0 degrees, go across the chart and find what.
But we're
pressure.
talking about freezer. We don't want to be at 0. We want to be at what in our freezer?
We want to be at negative, a little bit under 0. So let's say.
You know, we want to be here, but we want our evaporator to be colder than 0.
Okay, so now so we're not looking at the temperature inside the box. What we're looking at is what exact temperature we want our evaporator to be in order to achieve the temperature in the box. Got it.
The pressure of this makes
Got
the
it.
temperature of this, so it absorbs the heat of the
Got
air
it.
flowing over.
Got it. So if I'm looking for 0 in the box, then I need to have that at negative 15 or 20.
And then I could use it. If you look at any commercial refrigeration guys,
Yes.
AC guys, they walk around with a little pocket temperature pressure chart.
Okay.
You can get them from Johnstone and some of these other places. And they use that thing, and this is what they're doing with it. They're saying, okay, I need to achieve this pressure, or I need to achieve this temperature with this refrigerant. In order to do that, the evaporator has to be colder than this
Got it,
temperature.
man. Got it.
This is the pressure I got to be at in
Yes.
order to achieve it.
Got it. It just sunk in. I get it now. So forget the box. The box doesn't matter. It's the evaporator that I'm looking for. The box will achieve the temperature as long as I get that to the I get it. I get it.
Makes sense,
Fucking
right?
A.
All right. So this is temperature pressures in a refrigerant system.
Okay.
Okay. So
That is awesome, man.